He expressed to me that right-hand man had put our lives in danger because this husband, who was now upset with him, knew our vehicle. And so now I'm driving this vehicle that's breaking down in the same city or area where this husband is. Like, God only knows what could have happened. And so there was just this is just another example of how there was absolutely no regard. Also mentioning, while I'm on this same individual, this same husband came to the church that we were at on Covington Highway with a gun while we were all in service, and he was looking for right-hand man. And so just so many times our lives were put in danger because of the person I was married to, who was a pastor, and the people he had in leadership, or the people who were his friends. So I have my son, and the day I went into the hospital, actually I had him on July 21st. On July 20th, I went to the hospital because I was having contractions, and he was there along with my daughter. And I remember him saying, like, "Oh, are you sure? Because I have a meeting at 1 o'clock. Like, are you sure? Are you sure? I have a meeting with one of the sons at 1 o'clock. And I'm like, yeah, actually the meeting was at 11, and he was upset because he's like, I got this meeting and I don't want to lose the momentum, and you about to have a baby and we're going to have to slow down again, and I don't want to have to slow down and lose momentum. Like, I need to go to this meeting. Like, are you sure? And so they ended up telling me that I was like a centimeter dilated or something, and I could take time to go home and walk around and all of that. And so I went home. He had this son of his meet him at our home at 1 o'clock so he could meet. They were downstairs, and I remember it being 8 p.m. and I'm listening to them downstairs watching Hell's Kitchen while eating, and I'm upstairs contracting. And I just remember being like, wait, here am I uncomfortable. And if you ever have kids, it's very uncomfortable. And I remember texting him like, hey, can you come upstairs? Like, what's going on? And so he ended up telling me like, well, this is the way that this is how I build ministry. I have relationships with people. You do things very different. I have to have relationship. And so I had my son the very next day. When I have my son, he leaves the hospital that night because he said he needed to have a good rest. He needed to sleep well, and he had to preach the next morning. And it bothered me on so many different levels, one of which I will express. On October 15, 2010, I had my last miscarriage. He was actually in the hospital at this time for diabetes. And I stayed with him that entire week from the 10th until when he was released. So I knew that I was having a miscarriage. I was sitting in a chair. And when I say I stayed at the hospital, I mean like literally clothes were brought to me at the hospital. I got in the shower at the hospital. That's how much I stayed, because he said he was afraid. He didn't want me to leave. He didn't know how to talk to the doctors. He didn't want to talk to them alone. And so I stayed while miscarrying our child, sitting in a recliner. I didn't have the ability to even lay it back to sleep. And so I just couldn't believe that the man that I did that with and for, I'm having his baby, and now he could really look me in the face and say, I need to go home to sleep because I have to preach in the morning. I thought it was just and I was ready to leave then. And I believe then, honestly, I had decided, no matter what happens, I'm leaving. So we go home once he picks me up from the hospital. We go home, and he says, right-hand man would like to come see the baby. And he comes at 8 p.m. I end up, he sees the baby. I end up going upstairs. And I remember it's around midnight. And so now I'm like, okay, is he going to come upstairs? This is our first night home, me and your new baby, our first night home. And so he didn't come upstairs. And so at around 1 a.m., I texted him like, hey, can you bring me some watermelon? And so he brought me the watermelon, and then he went back downstairs. And so it was finally around 3:45 a.m., literally 3:45 a.m., that I finally said, hey, can you please ask him to leave, because this is our first night home and I would like to be with you. And so he left, and he began telling me like, oh, well, he was just talking about different things in ministry and different things on his heart and different changes he's making, and I'm excited for him. And I just remember in that moment telling him like, but this is not the time. This is inappropriate. This can't be life. Like, I'm all for ministry. I'm all for loving people, but this cannot be it. Like, I just had your child, your 8-pound, 10-ounce child. This can't be life. And so my son then began to grow, and unfortunately, it wasn't long before I was told that my son could no longer be at the dinner table with us after church because he was making too much noise. I mean, literally, he was like maybe 4 months old, and my husband arranged for him to go with another member after church until that following Monday. And I remember telling him like, absolutely not. And he's like, well, you're complaining about me not helping, and this is my way to help. And, you know, me saying, can you help, was more like, can you please change a diaper because you haven't changed any? Can you please hold him sometimes in the middle of the night when he's crying? Like, I didn't mean, can he go to somebody else's house overnight? And so he basically explained to me that when he eats with his sons, he wants to be able to enjoy himself. That's his time right after church to decompress. And he felt like I was being an awful wife by saying like, no, my son needs to be at the table with us. And so we argued about it. And then he's just like, well, I need him to go. Like, I need him to go. So my son for several months went with them after church and would not come home until the following day when he would pick him up when he was doing a radio show. And sometimes that would be maybe 7 p.m. if he would go before, if not even later. I noticed that he also started telling me that my son was too light. And that was perplexing because previously he had told me that my daughter was too dark. I remember him saying one day like, oh my God, I don't want her to get picked on. She is so dark. She's a lot darker than I am. I never imagined she would be this dark. I thought she would be, you know, near your complexion. And so my son is like the color of my mother. And that was a problem for him as well. He's like, why he's so light? And people think he don't look like me, but it's only because he's so light. He then started saying the little N-I-G-G-A doesn't like him. And so I'm like, at this time, he might have been 8 months. And he's like, yeah, he don't like me, but that's okay because I don't like him. But at the end of the day, this baby think he your man. And I'm like, huh? So he would make this joke when I was feeding him. He was a breastfed child. Like, oh yeah, nigga, like, that's fine. Those are mine, you on. Those are mine, you're on. And I would just tell him like, hey, stop. Like, babies pick up stuff like this, it didn't feel right. And so one time he took him, he said, you know what, I'm gonna do better. So it was March of 2019. My son had not turned 2 yet, and he took him out to lunch with a friend who was visiting. And I remember he brought him home and he said, oh, it was fine. You know, your son was kind of looking at the man strange for a little while, but then he started, you know, playing with him. He then began to tell me that his friend made the comment and said, hey, how do you feel that your son is the way you are and you're how you are? And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, he wanted to know how did I feel that my son is so masculine and I'm how I am. And so, again, I'm like, what is that? Like, my son is one. So a lot of even his humor around children, and in particular, even our children, was just extremely inappropriate, and I would become very uncomfortable. There was this time that I actually caught on camera where my son and I are playing, and I'm watching him learn his tongue because he's about 8 months, and you can actually hear in the background his father saying, I eat pussy, mommy. Hi. Hi. What's up? What are you doing? Learning a new trick with your tongue?
Yeah, get that going. Yeah, I can eat this,
Also, there was this time where my son and I, we walked into his office. And his office was a place where all of the men pretty much would gather and they would congregate right after service. And so they were all in there, and I remember I had a door fob for a Hyundai Genesis. And so it was like this. And my son put it in his mouth. Again, he was not one yet. And a few of the gentlemen said, "Whoa, whoa." And I looked like, what does that mean? And they were trying to insinuate, like it looked as though he was performing oral sex. And so I immediately asked my husband to come here because I thought at that point I was going to explode. Like I thought I was going to be on the news for real, because I don't think that's funny. And so I remember asking my husband, like, I need you to come here right now. And I said, did you hear what they just said? He's like, they didn't mean it like that. They're just playing. Like, come on, take a joke. There's nothing funny to me about children being looked at as anything sexual. And so I remember just telling him, like, they're perverted and they need, like, this is disgusting. And, you know, what you got going on, it's nasty. This is not okay. There was another time, it was August, forwarding to August of 2019, after I had initially left, where he literally, my son had a popsicle. So he had just turned 2. He had a popsicle because he was recovering from head, nose, foot. And he had the popsicle in his mouth, and I remember him saying, "Son, why are you holding that popsicle like that? Stop sucking that popsicle like that, son." I wasn't facing him, so I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't hear that. I remember telling the counselor, and so she said, you know what? Give him a popsicle again when he's around and see what happens. And I did the following day. And he said, oh my God, son, you're gonna have to stop sucking that popsicle like that. And I just remember being like, oh, he'll never be alone with my son. Like, something is wrong. There was also a time prior to that where my son was not yet walking, and his father was standing naked in the bathroom. I had walked in the bathroom to him standing there naked, and my son was just tall enough to be right where his penis was, where like his head was right where his penis was. And I remember saying, what is happening? Like, my son was kind of like looking up at him, and he said, oh no, he's just seeing what things are. I'm just showing him what things are. Again, and that was really like the biggest straw for me leaving, because I really realized that this was the beginning of me really realizing that he was sick beyond what I could imagine. I also think that it is not funny. Molestation is not funny, whether it's my child or anyone else's child. And unfortunately, fathers molest children. There are mothers that molest children. And I had just decided that there was no way in the world that would happen on my watch. There was no way in the world that would happen while I turn a blind eye and say, oh, well, my husband is a man of God, so I know he won't molest my child. There were a lot of things that happened prior to me leaving in 2019. There were a lot of things that happened after I left in May of 2019. One thing that I can say concerning my children is that I had offered supervised visitations because of things that I saw with my own eyes that, frankly, I felt he needed supervision. And then I received a death threat from him when things started to come out concerning his sexuality. And so for my safety and for the safety of my children, I asked that every visitation be at a supervised facility. Instead of that ever happening, he went to Facebook and, put up a video saying how much he loved me and just wished things were good, and, crying and saying he was suicidal, and people are spreading rumors, rumors about him. He then also began to express how much he loved his children and how he just couldn't imagine being separated from them. And you know, I, in reality, cannot imagine being separated from my children. They have not seen him in 2 years. They have not heard his voice in 2 years. My son is now 4. My daughter is now 10. And so my son doesn't even really remember who he is. And my daughter, honestly, she doesn't mention him. She did ask when the pandemic happened if he had reached out, and at that time he had not. And so I'm saying that to say, I could not imagine not knowing the sound of my children's voices at this age. I could not imagine not knowing. Before I left in 2019, he told me that my son wasn't speaking as well. And he said, I think he's a little slow. You need to get him some help. And so immediately I'm like, I'm calling and trying to get him appointments and stuff. But he hasn't even checked in to see, like, did he go to speech therapy? Can he talk now? Are things well? And really, come to find out, my son did not have a speech problem. It was just, for some reason, he was just very disgusted and annoyed with him. And I guess because he told me that he felt as though our children stopped us from being like rock stars, and he lived like a rock star. And so he wanted to just do what he wanted to do, and he felt like children got in the way of that. So I couldn't imagine not knowing my children right now, just to keep face on social media, just to keep with a narrative that is so far from the truth on social media. And so I will say that if I never learned that he is not well, this showed me that he's really not well. He doesn't know if they've eaten. He doesn't know. The last thing he told me about my children was that me and my children would suffer because I told the bishop about the different things that were happening behind closed doors. So he said, because you opened your big mouth and tried to check me, you and your children will suffer like the rest of your family. That is the last thing he said to me concerning my children. He started going to the hotel a lot when my son was born because he said that he needed a space to hear the voice of God. He said he was going through another season of depression, and he was just feeling like things weren't going as good for him as he thought they would be going. And so he needed to go away to the hotel to seek the face of God. At this time, we were in a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom home with the full basement with just 2 very small children. So although I didn't understand it, I didn't really have the energy anymore to fight. One time, I remember coming home, it was a Sunday, I had taken the kids out to eat, and I came home and he was laying in the bed. And so he said he was sick. And so I'm like, okay, well, are you okay? And so he said, oh, I didn't want to tell you, but I was so depressed. And I went down to the bar at the hotel. I told a stranger what was going on, and that stranger slipped me marijuana, a gummy. And so he began to say how he ate it, and he then got really, really sick, and right-hand man had to come help clean him up, and he had to get a whole different room, and like he went through this whole story, and he said right-hand man helped clean him up, and he then went to preach the following morning at church, and he was still sick, and so now that's why he came home early. And so he then told me, like, he was crying. I have this actually recorded, and I will say that I have like the last 4 years of our interactions and different interactions and leadership meetings and different things he said in church over the pulpit. I have many of those things recorded because he started telling me that I was just hearing things. And so I started recording so that I would know that I wasn't just hearing things and that my memory was serving me correctly. So it got to a point where different things would be said over the pulpit that were very conflicting one of which he was actually describing a violent situation that happened with his mom. At this time, the media ministry was not recording, but I did have permission from him to record so that he would be able to play back his messages.
She got her purse and went and got her truck. For a minute, I forgot she was my mom and treated her like a nigga. You know somebody may forget. Anger make you forget it. That's why you should make folks angry, because they might forget. See, all right. You think you get angry, other people get angry too. You think you're a big bad wolf, let me tell you something, I'm the wolf, I'm the Hulk. So she goes and walks out the door and gets in her car. Something took over me, but I don't know what it was. The enemy took over. Anger. It wasn't even enemy, it was anger. I get her, and she started her truck up. Oh, I put my hand up on the back of that truck and lifted it up. I lost my mind. Some of my friends was there. They said, oh, put it down. Oh, put it down. Because when you get angry, another spirit takes over. So they're not going to talk to me. That's true, sir. They're not going to talk to me. That's why I be telling all these people, all my sons, everyone in them got their moment when they try with me. You don't want to do that. Because this little cute preacher that you got up here, that's a learned behavior. I'm a nigga all day. Amen. Amen. Right. All day, don't you let these tassels fool you. You get me angry. I'm going to show out. And I'm going to show out on you just the way you showing out on me. Sort of like, Jesus, yes! Y'all think all the niggas is on the corner. No, a lot of them in the pulpit. I'm one. Yes, sir? And some people in church need that. They take advantage of people. They think everybody is a punk. Everybody ain't no punk, and they will get you right where you stand. Did you? I'm just saying, no, you ain't just saying nothing to me. Think about what you say.
Also, there were things like, we had a friend whose son was killed, and we went to the funeral, and my husband at the time didn't allow me to hug this friend after or go to the cemetery or anything like that, because he was upset that her husband didn't allow him to preach. He said that this was a huge platform, and if he was really his friend, he would have let him speak. And he said, everybody wants to be his friend until it's time to give him a platform. And he said he could have done a much better job than the person that was up. And so these were things like, I just remember feeling devastated in that moment, because you have to be some type of monster to think about yourself in that moment, let alone you're thinking about a platform. And things like that really let me know he was not a person who, every now and then just fell, or every now and then fell short of the mark, but he was a person who really had a wicked heart. Things such as platform, like I really hate that word now because I would hear it so much. I would hear how people in Rochester, New York just used him for his platform. He would often tell even the people in Georgia how he was so popular in Rochester that he could literally have pick your nose service and people would come from everywhere. And so he used things like even Facebook to receive a certain amount of validation. Honestly, he used this website called Engineer Facebook likes or something like that, and he would purchase Facebook likes. He would purchase Facebook views, and this is not something that I'm saying that I don't have record of. He was using the church's PayPal, which I'm the one who still has the login information for that account. And so you can see where he was purchasing these views, he was purchasing these likes. And that wouldn't matter necessarily if he wasn't then at church saying, see, people know that your man of God is something. Look at my Facebook. You can see. And image just became something that he was so very serious about. He started changing our faces literally with this app called Perfect 365. He would tell me all the time, if I took a picture of us, send it to me first so I could put some love on it. And I'm like, what does that mean? And so one time I remember sitting next to him like, what are you doing in our picture? He would literally airbrush our faces. He would take away our bags. He would add white to us. And it wasn't just me. It wasn't just him. He would do it for our daughter as well. And things just started to there were just times where things started to get weird. He started talking about how he thought different men in the church kind of was starting to like him. And then he was wearing makeup. And so at first he told me, well, he's wearing it for skin complexion. And so, that's your face. I'm not, who am I to say you can't wear it? And so then he started purchasing different things, such as, honestly, he purchased a fake behind. And so I'm like, wait, why do you need this? And he was putting it on for church. And I remember saying wait, why are you doing this? And he said, well, I need my behind to look a certain way in my pants. And I don't want to be getting up there looking all saggy in my pants. But then at the dinner table with the men, I would hear him talking about how different men were showing their prints and different things like that. So I started to notice I think he's kind of trying to purposely entice people. And again, I have the receipt for that purchase as well. So these are things, everything that I'm saying, I can testify in the court of law. This isn't me being facetious. This is just me showing how things just started to kind of unravel and I started to see more. May 11th, 2017, he ran in the room saying I needed to pray. And so I'm like, what's wrong? He then began to tell me that he felt like he was having a heart attack. The paramedics came, they discovered that everything, all his vitals, everything looked great. And they told him all is well, they were leaving. He began to cry and he said to me, Renee, but I really feel like something is wrong and I don't want anything to happen to me. And so me being his wife, I told the paramedics, no, please take him now. Please take him now. So very long story short, we get to the hospital. They sat him in just the regular waiting room with everyone else. I left for less than 30 minutes to drop my infant son off with the person who was watching him. I came back and he had told me at that time that one of the assistants, one of the nurses told him that it looked as though there were enzymes around his heart that could indicate a heart attack. Not that he had a heart attack, but that the enzymes around his heart looked like he may have. And so they were going to do more testing to see if they could determine that he had a heart attack or not. He called everybody. He called everybody, telling them, oh my God, I just had a heart attack. And I'm sitting there watching him no, let's wait until we get confirmation. They ended up keeping him that night. It was not for a heart attack. They determined he did not have a heart attack. Legally, I can't say why they kept him that night, but I can say that he did not have a heart attack. And so he then told the church, he kept with the story of a heart attack. He had our bishop come in town and everything. And that was the first time I actually left with my children because I just couldn't keep up with the lies. And I remember him actually admitting to me, he said to me, he said, well, you're mad about me saying I had a heart attack, but I just need time to rest. He said, and furthermore, and he began to cry and he said, how do you think I feel that my family thinks I really had a heart attack and none of them have come to see me? None of them have called me or they don't care. How do you think I feel? And so I remember then feeling bad, wow, they thought he had a heart attack and nobody really came. Then there was November of 2018. We had decided to host Thanksgiving that November. And a lot of my family, they were flying in from Rochester, New York to Georgia. And so we were at around the 14th, we received an eviction notice. And so we needed, I believe it was $2,000. I have the paper still from the sheriff. But I believe it was around $2,000, $3,000 that we needed in order to stay. And so he asked his mother for some money. It was $200. He asked her to borrow $200. And I think it ended up being $400. So he told me that he borrowed it on that Wednesday. She wanted it on that Sunday right after church because he told her, like, you know, he would get it at church that Sunday. And so that is where the cancer lie started. The cancer lie, he ended up telling me that it started because he had to give his mom a reason why he was borrowing money from her. And he didn't feel comfortable telling her that he was borrowing money because we were about to be evicted. So he told her, like, you're doing all this and you don't really want to give me the money, but at the end of the day, I had to spend my money. At this place to get help. And so he's telling me this, and I said, well, what help? And so he sat me down and he said, Renee, I didn't want to tell you this, but a month or so ago, the doctor told me that they found a spot in my stomach and that I have cancer. And so he said he had been at Progressive Medical, which was a place that I had previously used. And that is a place that you pay basically out of pocket if you don't have insurance. We had Medicaid at the time, so they didn't take it. And so I looked at him and I said, that's a lie. Like, I literally said, that's a lie. And I knew it was a lie because, again, I was the one with his insurance cards. I was the one who always made any of his appointments that he ever went to. For over 12 years. So I didn't understand how now at this point you would not only go to the doctor without even telling me, but you would get this cancer diagnosis. You would hide it from me and only tell one of the other members at the church. Until then, you borrowed money from your mother. She had an attitude about it, according to you. And so then you blurted out like, well, I only borrowed it because I had cancer and I had to pay. And so I said, that's a lie. And he's like, no, I promise. Like, why would I lie about that? And so I'm like, okay, so what did the doctors tell you to do? And so he said, they gave him this pill to take once a week, and he would take it once a week to watch the cancer disintegrate prayerfully. He never showed me where the pills were. And again, this is a person who, anytime he ever went to the doctor, the dentist, anything, I would be the one fulfilling the prescription. So again, I'm just like, this is not adding up. And even though they didn't take insurance, you would definitely need a prescription for that. So I ended up calling where he said he went. And I called like, hi, this is Mrs. Francis, just calling to make a follow-up appointment for my husband. I said his name, and she's like, I don't see him in here. And so, I won't say her name on here, but she began to search for him, and I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, well, when did he come? And so I gave her the date he said he came. She searched the records, the calendar for 3 months prior to when he said he was there and never found him anywhere in the records. And so she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I can't find him. I knew why she couldn't find him, because he had not been there. And so she then said, well, could he have been a patient 2 years prior? Because we did get a new system 2 years prior. Long story short, she searches for him then. He's nowhere to be found. 2 weeks later, when he knew, I asked him, I said, hey, so have you been getting any blood work? Like, what are they doing to, keep up on this? 2 weeks after me asking that question, he comes home with this band on his arm, and he's like, oh, I didn't want to bother you today, so I went and got my blood work done. And I said, well, where did you go? And he couldn't name the facility. It wasn't even a week after that. In the mail, I went to check the mail, and there was something from the Red Cross that said, thank you so much, Charles, for your donation. So he had donated blood. And I'm saying that to say that is how much he would do to prove a lie. Also, I walked in the room one day to him on the phone. And when he was on the phone, I heard this beep, beep, beep. So I looked, and his laptop was up. And it was on YouTube, and it literally said hospital sounds. And so it was doing the beep noise, and it also had this hospital sound in the background, like of people paging people. And so he looked at me and said, and so he finished his conversation and said, oh, okay, well, First lady walked in, so I'm gonna have to call you back, okay? Hung up the phone. And so I said, what are you doing? He looked at me and he started crying and he said, Renee, you don't understand. When you tell people you're sick and you need a break, you get a break. When I tell people I'm sick, they don't believe me unless I'm laid up somewhere in the hospital. And again, this was another thing. Like, I felt like I was living in a movie that just wasn't even, like, it just wasn't stopping. And these were things that were happening that I had to record. I had to document, because, like, who in the world would believe that people did things like this in real life? And so with the cancer thing, he had started spreading to other people. Like, I have cancer, but don't tell my wife. I have cancer, but don't tell my wife. And I found out later, after I left, people were telling me, like, I'm so sorry. He told me he had cancer, but not to tell you because he didn't want you to worry. Specifically, too, there was a woman from our city who got pregnant. Well, there was cancer in her body, and she went back for the ultrasound, and God had placed a baby in her womb. And this is a person that I love, and it was like everywhere on social media. And I remember him telling me, like, oh my gosh, she just blew up over this. Like, she blew up over this, and how we even know that's true? And I said, no, I'm sure it's true. Like, we'll see the baby, we'll know it's true. Like, I'm sure it's true. And I'm rejoicing, like, thank you, God. And he began to tell me, see, you never tell people what you're going through. You never tell people about your sickness and stuff, and you're stopping your blessing. Like, he started going through the list of the different shows she was on based on her releasing this testimony. And so I do believe that in addition to his mother, him wanting to give his mother a story as to why he needed the money, he also saw this as an opportunity to come up. He saw this as an opportunity, like, hey, if I got cancer and then I'm well, I could potentially get publicity. There were so many things that I found out once I left, one of which, someone contacted me telling me that they were going to come out with some information, and they wanted me to know that it involved the person that I was married to. When I was pregnant with my son, I would walk into the room and I would often hear my husband on the phone talking to another man. And in these conversations, he would describe different things that had happened previously. However, he would always describe it the same. He would say that this person, he would sleep, and this person would perform oral sex on him. And he didn't mention just one person. He mentioned several different people. And the major problem with the people that he mentioned, they were all people who were my age and fellow students of, students. They were in school when I was in school, which meant he was their teacher. And the thing is, each time the names would change, but the story would be the same. And so there was also this time in May of 2013 where he reached out to this former student to come to the church that we were just starting in Atlanta. And so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah, I would love to have him. Like, that'd be great. And so when I came home, he was crying on the steps, and I'm like, what's wrong? He began to tell me that this person said if he didn't pay for his therapy, that he would call the cops. And so I'm like, wait, what do you mean therapy, cops? It wasn't clicking to me. And so he then took a deep breath and he said, well, he is trying to say that I did something to him, but really it wasn't me. It was the other teacher. Like, I really didn't do anything. Like, it was not me, and this is just the devil. And he began to call, like, all the preachers that we knew, saying, like, the enemy is attacking me. He didn't say what it was, but he was just telling them to pray. And I mean, he was praying, he was fasting, and he was really just saying, like, no, like, I really did nothing to him. Then he told me, well, what really happened, I'm going to tell you what really happened. It was a few days later. He said, I'm going to tell you what really happened. And he told me that this person came to his mom's house to spend the night when he was in high school. Again, my husband at the time wasn't in high school, but the student was. and he said that he woke up to him performing oral sex on him. And I told him that a judge, like no judge would believe that, because he had also said this other student did it, and he had also said this other student did it. And so at this point, I questioned him like, hey, so now we're up to 3 students that you gave me first and last names that they did this to you. Like, why would you keep letting students come to the house if this is what's happening? He began to explain to me that I didn't understand molestation. I've never been molested, and how the enemy always had this target on his back, and how, I just didn't understand even boys who didn't have fathers in their lives, and all he wanted to do was be a father, and they really just misplaced that. And so like he would forgive them and just move on, and I just need to understand. And so fast forward to years later, I'm hearing other new names, first and last names. Then he did describe some things that happened between him and gentlemen while he was in high school, again, while he's on the phone with this person. And the things that happened with him and gentlemen while he was in high school, like, that's very different than being a pedophile, right? Because they were the same age. However, I still would have liked to known, because again, I thought I was marrying a virgin. I was told I was marrying a virgin. And so when I left, there was a lot of triangulation, a lot of rumors that he was spreading, down to I was mentally ill. He spreaded that I was stealing, or I stole money from the church. And I understand why he had to make up those lies. He had to say that I stole money because he needed to explain to the people who remained with him why he had nothing, and it seemed as though I was still living and still doing it well. And it was because he painted this picture as though I was this damsel in distress. He painted this picture as though he was just this wonderful husband, but really behind the scenes, I was, by the help and through the grace of God, like everything that was good that was happening, by the grace of God, it was me and a team of honest people working on it. And so he needed a way out, a way to still get their money and to not look like the fraud that he really was. So October of 2020, a former member puts up a post expressing how she was disappointed to find out, because things did get out about him being with other people while he was married, and especially the whole pedophilia thing, like being with underage people, being with somebody who was your godson, And so when that got out, she was disappointed. So she did put up something on Facebook stating that she was disappointed by this former pastor, and she's just thankful nothing happened to her son. And so from what I'm told, people began to just comment on there, and unfortunately people who are with him, his right-hand man, along with 2 others, they got on there just saying very condescending things, lying. One of the things, and they were silly things, but things that I know were coming from him. For instance, the one female that got on there just expressed that, hey, I'm still going around with the title that only came from married. I'm still using Lady Renee. And so for somebody else, that would mean nothing. For me, I sat down with him 2014 when he first was unfaithful with his godson. And I told him, so at that time I was just about to release a single. And I told him, I said, hey, so when I release this and everything from now on, my stage name now is Lady Renee. And I said, this works for me for so many reasons. The first reason, I was honest with him. I said, when I'm no longer married to you, I don't want to still be using your last name. Like, I want people to get used to me not being associated with your last name in case we are no longer married. And I also told him that I wanted to do things as an artist, and I wanted to be in more than just a church, and I wanted people to be comfortable with me. I felt like prior to that, I always went by Pastor Renee, or Lady Francis, Pastor Renee or Lady Francis. And I felt like when people said pastor, no matter how kind of like cool I looked, most people froze up. And because I'm young, I wanted to be able to go in and out of all different genres, all different rooms, and people be comfortable. And so we had Lady Gaga, and I'm like, ooh, I love the sound of Lady Renee. And so that was my honest conversation with him. And I remember him years later saying, like, you won't be anything without me, and you can't use that name without me. And I'm like, yeah, so it's not First Lady for church. It's literally my stage name now. It's a brand name now. Like, I have it on stuff. I'm keeping it. And so as silly as it sounds, it was something that he had somebody say, basically to just say like, oh, she can't use that name anymore. And to show even how much more kind of twisted that is, he's still going by doctor, and he purchased his doctorate online from the Universal Life Church in 2008. And so that isn't something that I'm saying, hey, don't go by doctor because you're not technically a doctor. And so just things like that were so petty. Also, the two men on there, they became very aggressive. And one of the things they said was, oh, so now she's gonna say she was beat too? And the thing is, as close as they think they were never in our marriage, right? Whatever they had going on, it was still not in our marriage. And that's why things are typically called extramarital, because it's not in our marriage. And so the same person that was saying, oh, so is he gonna say, oh, so is she gonna say that he was violent too, that he beat her too? Like, he was violent with him. He had on August 11th of 2017, he had tried to run him over with a vehicle at Main Event because he said that he did not pay for his food and they were supposed to be taking him out for his birthday. That's what Mr. Francis really tried to do. Also, he had pinned this same man that's saying, wait, so is she gonna say that he beat her too? This same man was pinned on the floor by Dr. Francis in his apartment because he asked him to leave and he said no. He said, your mom is gonna have to make me leave because this is her apartment. So they literally called his mom while he is on the floor screaming and crying because he can't get up. And so there were violent times in our marriage. There were things that happened in our marriage. In addition to him shooting me out the car, there was this other time where I was sitting holding my baby, it was October of 2017. He was born July of 2017. And he came home from church. And I remember just going through a list because he said, hey, you keep accusing me of stuff, like, tell me when. So I went through the list of what I had documented. And so he sat there and said, you're being so historical and you're just crazy and this is stupid. And he went to swing his hand and my baby was here, but when he swung his hand, I tried to like get him away. My baby flew where I couldn't see the baby, and he had me pinned down on the bed. I heard my baby crying. He would not allow, like he was 280 pounds at the time, and I was a lot smaller. And so he had me pinned, would not let me get up. And I said, I hear the baby crying. Please just let me get up. Please just let me get up. And he said, no, like if you thought about the baby crying, you shouldn't have swung your arm. You shouldn't have swung your arm. And so he had claimed that when I swung, I fractured something in his arm, which when he went to the doctor, that was confirmed. But it was a swing because he was about to attack me. And there were also other times. I never called the police. I didn't call the police because Georgia is a place where if you call the police, they typically will take both of you to jail. Also, because of the way he cries, and even when we would get into these physical altercations, he would always attack first. But when we would get into these altercations, because I would fight back, he would have markings. And so it did sometimes, the end would sometimes look as though I was the aggressor, even though I was just simply fighting back. So there were also times where violence happened at our church and nothing happened. Like this right-hand man fought his girlfriend outside of the church. Nothing happened. This same person jacked another man up out at the church and nothing happened. So there were many times of violence. And I'll say one of the blessings of that post and of them being on there and doing that was it showed people more than it ever could tell people just who the person I was married to was. And I remember a pastor's wife calling me and she's like, my husband really wants to talk to you. And so he said, Lady Renee, I've seen everything that happened on Facebook. And he just said, I just want to make sure you're okay. Like, where are you? So many men were inboxing me, asking me where I was because they were saying, like, we want to come protect you. And the way they're talking about you, like, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Because they could tell from the post that these men were aggressive and they were going to do whatever they could to make sure that their leader, his name was good. Because when it's all said and done, many people say, oh, it's two sides to every story and it takes two to tango. But this person knows behind closed doors who I was. This person knows that they are not telling the truth. This person knows the mother, the wife, the pastor, everything that I was behind closed doors. I mean, one of the things that even happened, one time I woke up to him crying and he's like, why are you with me? Like, you're just so good. Why are you really with me? And I remember in that moment being like, wait, is he serious? And I'm just like, oh no, like you're good too. We're both good. But in this moment, when this Facebook thing happened, in addition to people realizing that I really needed protection and they wanted to make sure that I was physically okay, also it showed his real character. I had so many men reaching out saying, no man would ever do that, ever, no matter what. No man would ever allow his friends, people from his church, nobody to get on social media and disrespect the mother of their children like that, and this was again all to cover up for the wrong that he had done. One of the things that this post also brought was so many more people saying me too, and not me too by random people, but me too by this exact person. There were people contacting me saying that they were going to do documentaries from the charter school, like just from all these different places, because he had been to several schools in the city of Rochester, New York, and there were so many people coming forward with their stories. And if they weren't sending them to me, they were sending them to people I know, and I was receiving screenshots like, oh, he did this to me too. And so I ended up talking to one individual who told me the different things he was doing to him, and I realized even more that I literally was a cover. He literally pursued me because at the time that he pursued me, it was literally because he was about to be investigated about allegations concerning young men. And so although it didn't look good to be involved with a younger lady, he would rather it be a younger lady than a younger man. The thing about the different people that have come forward, saying like, he did it to me too, he did it to me too, from him, and I can and will, when the time permits, I will testify in the court of law that he literally, by the time I left him, I had already had 7 first and last names of young men who he said had performed oral sex on him while he was asleep, and he was the teacher at School of the Arts. Learning of all of that was extremely devastating. Learning that this person is a literal predator, that this person is very calculated and hiding behind God and hiding behind the cloth and hiding even behind forgiveness. Because that's one of the things he said in one of his videos. Some things that got out about me, yeah, they're true, and some things were not true, but I still should have been covered, right? And so that's one of the major things he said to me, like, how dare you uncover me, even when I told the bishop. And that is not true, unfortunately. That is a doctrine that has gotten into many churches where predators are able to be hidden, and they're hidden in the name of, we're just going to put this under the rug and pretend like it didn't happen. And so I am aware that not many people will be comfortable with me saying all that I said today. There were so many things that I went through in the name of God, in the name of your suffering for righteousness' sake. And it was really gaslighting. It was really manipulation. It was so much spiritual abuse. There was so many times where I should have and could have left with God's permission. But I even came from the place where you pray and you stay. It would be easy for me to go on with the rest of my life and pretend like none of this ever happened. But I can't. I can't for the innocent blood that is crying out. I can't for the young men that were molested and sometimes still have nightmares about what had happened. I can't for the members of our churches who were lied to, who were spiritually abused many times in the name of God, who were taken advantage of many times in the name of God. I can't, I cannot be quiet. I cannot be silent. And I often wonder if I was supposed to read somebody's book. I often wonder if I was supposed to see somebody's documentary years ago that would have stopped me or got me to leave my marriage even quicker, stop me from entering the marriage or even leave it quicker, but they didn't write it out of fear. And so for that reason, even with death threats, I have to release this. For that reason, even with knowing that many people won't understand, knowing that many people will think, oh no, she just needs to forgive and forget, I have to speak up, I have to speak out, because people need to know that this is not what God wants for them. And people need to see that this is nothing to hide from. If this is nothing to hide, if you're in it, there is hope. You can get out. I have been healed so much. I am still honestly in the process of healing, but I trust and believe God, and I know that He makes all things beautiful in His time. Even though everything I went through was a nightmare, the thing that I hold on to is what the enemy meant for evil, God has a way of turning it for good. And so even if what I went through was for one person, it was worth it. And I'm thankful that I can now speak out so nobody else has to go through what I went through. I didn't mean to cry.